Glad to have you join us on Core Digest today. We are talking about the 2018 budget. President Muhammadu Buhari signs fiscal documents. Today, Wednesday, 20th of June, the President Muhammadu Buhari would sign that budget of 9.12 trillion naira into law, and that is for the 2018 fiscal year. The budget appropriation, or the Appropriation Bill, was presented to a joint session of the National Assembly on November the 7th, 2017. About 6 months into that, eventually the National Assembly did pass that budget and then sent it to the president for assent. Of course, there were several issues that arose while the document was with the lawmakers, talking about calling on MDAs to come defend the budget, talk about why the content is the way it is, and then they eventually add into the budget with about 500 billion naira to increase it from about 8 trillion naira to 9.12 trillion naira. Joining me in the studio to discuss this issue this morning is Vivian Ani. She is an economist. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks, Mr.
All right, so the 2018 budget will be signed into law today. As an economist, how do you see the process so far?
6 months into the year, in a country that's very dependent on government policies and government spending in a lot of places to move forward. It's a bad one, I must tell you this. And I said this before previously. I said the Nigerian Constitution does not stipulate timelines for submitting the budget. The only thing it says is that you must submit a budget before 1st of January, the year, so for 2018 budget, you're expected to submit before 1st of January 2018. In a country like Nigeria, where people have no sense of urgency, it's the worst thing you could ever say. I would have preferred a case where the budget stipulates that, look, you know what, by June of the preceding year, for whatever budget year you're addressing, the budget appropriation, the budget must be ready and presented for appropriation to the National Assembly. And the National Assembly, once it gets to you, you have 3 months to do your job. And boss said, it is possible. But let me not preempt your next questions. Let me stop here, because go on.
All right, definitely. The process that, this document has taken from November the 7th last year, and all the intricacies that came up, the National Assembly having to request the MDAs to come defend. Was that really necessary, or was it something that the MDAs should ordinarily know about, and they themselves just submitting themselves to go defend that?
Let me say this. I'm also a business consultant, and one of the things we do is that we look at how technology can improve businesses. I must tell you the truth. The problem of budgets is not only in Nigeria. I'm sure you've heard about the government shutdowns in the US, where the president wants to go in a certain way and presents a budget, and then National Assembly members say, no, it does not cover the areas we're interested in. So it's not just Nigeria. However, like I said, Nigeria's problem has become like this. Where June, in the current budget year, we're still at this point, because the Constitution itself has not put in place timelines. But all that said, look, what's that? In the private sector, I'm an ex-banker, and I know how we used to go through the budgeting process to produce those big figures that everybody goes, billions of naira made every year. And I remember that at a certain time of the year you're supposed to present this. It has gotten to the point that if you believe that the delays that have to do with process, remember budget 2 has a process, and then there's also that going back and forth where the NAS members want to be sure that certain interests have been catered for in the budget. You can at least eliminate the process problems by using technology. What do I mean? What is wrong with the budget office being hooked up to the NDAs, where, and this is what it now means, it goes from unit to department to agency to ministry, and then finally to the budget office. I think that's the process. What's wrong with, so that at the very point where a unit is coming up with its budget, and at the point where it has been approved by the supervising ministry or supervising parastatal, whichever one it falls into, the budget office is looking at the same thing they're looking at. What is this thing about passing around papers and then somebody says, it's not the original paper I passed, it was switched, you changed something? Look, technology has gone to the point that it is actually possible to put what we call either a digital certificate or a digital signature. Meaning that once I pass on a document to you, you cannot alter that document because it has been digitally signed by all parties. So by the time you take care of the process, now come to do with the politics of, I want something in the budget, you don't want something in the budget, back and forth. Like I said again, if you impose timelines, The National Assembly has committees, budget committees. The problem now is that people take their time. There's a lot of grandstanding, which, like I said before, happens in every society. Even in the US, it happens. I'm sure you've read all the things that have been happening with budget shutdowns. Now, there's a lot of grandstanding, meaning we want to hold this person to ransom. If he doesn't do this, we'll not release this and blah, blah, blah. But a lot of the delay too has to do with the process. If you look at the grandstanding and all the politics will probably take about 2 to 3 months. So if you solve the process issues using technology, by the time because they must debate the budget is too important for you to say, oh, you shove it under my chin or my face and then expect me to look at it for 1 week, deliberated and no. But if you eliminate the delays at the process stage, you find out that you have a longer time for the deliberation stage, and the Constitution imposes timelines on which certain things must be done. By and large, you should be able to solve this problem.
All right, and there have been divergent views about the National Assembly, the legislative arm of government now, adding some more projects or inflating, the amount of budgeted for certain projects contained in that document. You have legal practitioners say, the National Assembly it can't just swallow whatever the executive passes to them, hook, line, and sinker. They also need to tinker with it and all that. And some others say that, even if they would do that, they should rather contact the MDAs who are directly in charge, and then they themselves would add those projects into it. What do you make of all of that, whether or not the National Assembly has the right to inflate or to add projects and all that, and the manner of projects they end up adding?
You know why I'm laughing? Because this same argument is playing out in the US. I'm sure you've heard about pork projects, you've heard about bridges to nowhere in the US, where you come from a certain constituency and you promised your people that I'm going to deliver the dividends of democracy. So what you do is that once you're in charge of a committee in the National Assembly, in charge of a budget, or you're a very powerful senator or a very powerful representative of your people, what you do is that you get a project that really has no big economic benefit or seen on a bigger level, but it is to show your constituents that you're working in Washington. Now let's go back to the Nigerian case. This is a problem again. The Constitution. Why some people say what the National Assembly did was it's not proper. It's the executive who should initiate changes in budget. But to be honest with you, the Constitution is a bit vague on that. The same Constitution says that you must check the activities of the executive. The same Constitution says that you have every right to refuse to approve once you believe that it contradicts the Nigerian Constitution. And then don't forget that the Nigerian Constitution says that the budget must be done in such a way that it does not discriminate against any group or individual. Now that is subject to a lot of interpretation or misinterpretation. So what I think we should be more worried about is these projects that they increased their value. What kind of projects were there? I think I read through that increase. Basically, there were developmental projects. Some went to health, some went to education, some went to the NNDC, the Niger Delta Commission, for obvious reasons. We're still very much reliant on oil revenues. If the Niger Delta goes up in protest, that's it. No money for anybody. So you have to do everything to keep them happy. So I think we should. So if you look at the Constitution to guide you, it's too vague.
Now, when people look at the viewpoint of the National Assembly regarding this document and the viewpoint of the executive regarding this, and they say, okay, this is perhaps good for the system because when these arms of government aren't, are somewhat at loggerheads, then maybe they're defending the interests of Nigerians. Do you see that way?
It depends. Look, being selfish is something that's innate to human nature. And I think it's just hardwired into our DNA. So that's why we come up with what's in it for me. The executive plays that game, the National Assembly too plays the game. Don't forget that these National Assembly members were elected by their people. And I'm sure you've been reading all the news that's been going on where you see National Assembly members going back to their constituencies and they get stones thrown at them. The constituents are saying, you've not done anything for us. The truth of it is that doing something for them cannot come out of their own pocket. It has to come out of somewhere. So what they do typically with the budget is that once a budget is presented, they see it as an opportunity to twist the executive. And don't forget, even that budget, the same way we accuse the National Assembly members of being self. I know that there's a lot of spotlight on the National Assembly members, but look at it too. Some of the figures that were put forward by the executives were ridiculous figures, which are very, very impossible to defend. I will not even say hard. impossible to defend. So both sides are playing the game. Believe me, there's no saint or sinner in this case.
So where does that leave the Nigerian people?
It all depends on who's representing you. Certain representatives have done very well for their people. They have taken this whole constituency projects into a whole new level. They've taken it to develop their places. They've taken it to bring the dividends of democracy to the grassroots. And the truth of it, a lot of people to it has been abused. You hear some senators have been awarded constituency projects worth billions of naira. You can't say it. You hear some ministries. I'm going to the executive now. I told you there's no saint or sinner in this thing. So nobody should pretend to be a saint. Whether the executive, whether the national, there's no saint or sinner. I see all the sensational headlines and I just laugh. And I'm saying, why are you just focusing on one group of people? Have you also focused on the one the executive is doing? A lot of the NGOs too have gotten this, and the NDAs in this case, headed by ministers. So really, that's the executive, the political appointees. They've gotten this budgets and we really don't see what they've done with it. We really, really do not see what they've done. So, like I said, it depends on the personality of the person who's in charge. We've seen Nigerian MDAs work very efficiently. I mean, for crying out aloud, the GSM case was widely applauded all over the world, and today we're all enjoying the benefits of GSM. Nigeria has become one of the highest GSM penetration rates in the world, and blah 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 blah. You know the rest, and you can trace that to the kind of personalities who oversaw the GSM licensing process. So, some members of the House of Assembly have done very well for their people and impacted on the Nigerian people. Some members of the executive, even now, maybe history is what tells us who has done particularly well. Because at times, in the heat of the moment, it's difficult to know how much progress has been made. It's when you now look back in retrospect. So even now as we speak, there are probably some people who are doing very well that we'll see later on have done well. So where the Nigerian people stand is that it depends on who is charged. And that is why it's very important to put the right people in the right places.
All right, but then what is your viewpoint about constituency projects? Do you think it's something that should be in the national budget where, each lawmaker is now given something to go do something back home? Because there doesn't seem to, although we know that there citizens themselves are becoming checks and balances in this matter. They're watching out for what their representatives are doing. But beyond that, how do you analyze the idea?
It's terrible. It's wasteful and it's terrible. I see constituency projects as the same as security votes. Money you don't really have to account for. I don't know if you get what I mean. Look, this is the problem I have about the budget. Look, you see all these trillions. Yes, they try to pin it to projects. But remember that in the end, it's at the discretion of the executive, even though there's an appropriation bill. And I'll give you an example. If, for example, you present a budget of 9 trillion this year, and in the end, and don't forget that there's a huge amount of borrowing inside that 9 trillion. You now come up at the end of the year, you say, look, we thought we could borrow so amount of money, but we couldn't because of the realities of the marketplace. The borrowing marketplace had changed. So we're only able to borrow half of what we thought we could borrow, and that impacted on the performance of the budget. You see, the way it is, it now allows you to reshuffle even the appropriation. So even when, maybe let me make this clear, if the National Assembly has said based on appropriation you're supposed to allocate 5 naira to this project, 10 naira to another project, 20 naira to another project based on the fact that you're borrowing so money, you can come up and say I couldn't borrow as much as I could borrow, and rather than allocate 5 naira, I had to allocate 1 naira. The other project I ended up not being able to allocate anything because I had to balance based on. Now when you get into that, it means that the budget itself now becomes an instrument that does not have much weight when it comes to physical application or implementation. What it now means is that a lot of this so-called appropriation now becomes very discretionary. This is the danger in that. In a Nigeria that we all know that people are very ruled by sentiments, a lot of appropriation is not done based on what is going to benefit all of us, what is going to move all of us forward. Is now done on what is going to benefit my immediate constituency. And I'm not just talking about the National Assembly members, I'm also talking about the executive. We've seen cases where people have been put in positions and move certain projects to their village. Not because it makes sense to move that project to their village, but because they can. So, so the whole budget implementation thing, vis-a-vis how it actually works in real life, I tell people that I am no longer impressed by budgets.